Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. And today we have as our special guest Micah Allen Losh. I don't know why I accidentally got it wrong in one spot, and now I'm having trouble. I was saying Micah every time, and then now all of a sudden I'm saying Michael.
No worries. It is actually Losh, but everyone says Losh too. So
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah, I just have a difficult name.
I had a friend whose name was Ann Lee. Sounds like a really easy name, right?
Mhm.
No, she had to spell it every time. It's Ann with an E, Lee, Leigh. So
Hmm.
neither the Ann nor the Lee was the most common spelling.
Yeah, it's I know. No matter, I mean, you could be named Bob and somebody would mispronounce it, I think. So it should,
Bob.
yeah,
Well, why not? It's Job.
yeah,
So why
yeah,
not Bob?
yeah.
Oh. Okay. We have a few people watching today. Hello to friends BS Not Accepted, What the Beck, and Mark Caesar and Nevermore. Hello to all of you, as well as hello to everyone who is watching in the future. Today, my guest, as I said, is Micah Allen Losh. I got it right that time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And God equals the square root of -1 says, get a Job. Okay. My guest today is an ex-JW, and he's written a couple of books, and he has a fascinating backstory. So where should we start? You don't have a YouTube channel, do you? Or
I
do you?
do, but I only have two videos. One is a commercial I made for my memoir, and then the other is just another little thing. I've thought about making content down the road, but I've kind of been focused on my writing.
Okay. And there are links in the description to Micah's books. There are two books currently out, and there's a third one coming in December. Why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about your books.
Okay. Well, after, I had been away from Jehovah's Witnesses for, it's kind of like waking up. It was little cracks, building up to just everything breaking down. And um, for pretty much, 37 years, I believed I was born into the truth. I believed I was one of God's chosen ones, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And when I became, I would become aware of things and then I would maybe look online, but I had been told and I really believed that if I looked at anything negative, satanic influences would warp my mind. So there was a very real fear. And so once I kind of realized, okay, what I was a part of is not what I thought it was.
And how old were you at that point?
Uh, 38,
Okay. Okay.
and I'm 40 now.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I was already distance, and nobody was speaking to me, not my mother. But I knew that they were still um abusing people in similar ways and other ways as well. I became aware of all the CSA abuse, and I was never sexually abused, but just knowing that that was going around probably really infuriated me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and of course, I was mistreated for having depression after my father died. He died when I was 13, and it, just I was always kind of kept at a distance, soft shunned, I would say. But I got on the XJW Reddit, and during COVID, pretty much my life blew up, and I ended up being homeless a few days, and I lost everything I owned. And I saw a boy. He said he was 15 and he wanted to tell his parents he was gay, but he knew that they would throw him out, and he had nowhere to go. And that was one of the things I was like, man, that's just, I wanted to help draw awareness about this group, because people know odd things about Mormons and Scientology, but Jehovah's Witnesses, most people don't seem to really know. And a girl I worked with, she asked me one day, she said, "What was it like?" And when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're told, everybody knows about you and your good example, and the whole world is watching you. And based on your dress and grooming and speech and the way you carry yourself, you could draw all these people in. And then when I'm out, I realize that nobody knows anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. They know they go door to door,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they don't celebrate birthdays, but they don't know why. But when you're in it, you're just told that people are just like, oh, that boy, he's living such a good life, but no one's doing that. So
I could never, if I saw a pair of Jehovah Witnesses and a pair of Mormons, I couldn't tell you which were which.
Mormons are on bicycles, Jehovah's Witnesses are in cars. And
Ah,
Mormons,
okay.
I don't know why. I mean, it kind of seems like the Mormons got the short end of the straw, but
Mm-hmm.
and Mormons usually don't wear suit jackets either. And
Mm.
they only have to do it for a certain amount of years. Jehovah's Witnesses, it doesn't matter if you're 6 months old, you're supposed to be taking your baby out, or if you're 90, I mean, but I knew if I spoke out that I would be labeled. One of the things they say about baptized members who leave, they're called agents of Satan. And
Mm.
even though that's absurd,
Mm-hmm.
that is a difficult thing to know that people are going to think that of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, I even I have shared custody of my son, but I was, I've been repairing my life, so I've been estranged from him the better portion of 3 years. And but
I'm sorry. You've been estranged from who for 3 years?
from my son, he's
Yes, your
5.
son. Okay, that's what I thought you said, but I wasn't sure.
And
Okay.
and because I had $32,000 in debt. I've got about 6 left, which I should have paid off in a couple months. But I've just been digging myself out of this hole, and I really worried. What if something were to happen to me? My son just wouldn't know. I would just disappear from his life, I think. So I wanted
Is
to.
your son an adult?
He's 5.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted I wanted him to know what happened, and I also wanted to raise awareness about this group. So I decided, and I have had a very odd life, I guess. Even among a lot of ex-JWs that I've talked to, I feel like my exit has been one of the more severe ones. And
Okay. Okay.
so, and I
So
felt like,
tell us about your exit.
so during COVID, yeah, I thought that was Armageddon. Every night, from the time I was a little boy, I'm praying to my God to bring an end to his enemies, which I know means murdering everyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought COVID was it. Years earlier, I had sought help from an elder, which that's the leadership in the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And I just told him very clearly that I planned to end my life. And 2 guys I grew up with had committed suicide that summer. No one seemed to care. They just said that's what happens when you distance yourself from Jehovah. And of course, he lied about it. So I got into an argument with him, and I threatened to beat him up. Well, he told my mother that I had threatened to murder everyone at the Kingdom Hall.
Oh,
Uh,
brother.
and of course, they didn't alert the police, because even when children are molested, they don't alert the police. They said they had to call the world headquarters. They never received such disrespect. Hitler had Jehovah's Witnesses in concentration camps, but I'm like the worst person. So my mom stopped talking to me. So I was binge drinking, like probably a fifth a night.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I expected, if Armageddon, when it arrived, that Jehovah would kill me and kill my wife and my stepson and my child, because I wasn't a good spiritual head. So I was
Mm.
just spiraling. I wound up in jail. I wound up homeless. I lost my car. And then I found my way into, because I was drunk. For me, I was just like, oh well, I don't need to drink anymore because this is not who I am. And I wound up in a treatment facility, or a halfway house essentially. Uh, and in AA, everyone was, shoving God down my throat. God with a capital G, which
Mhm.
fundamentally is a creator, but they're trying to do a bait and switch. And I don't believe in God. And they really disliked me, and they acted like, I'm not going to drink. You probably shouldn't do heroin anymore. You should stay away from cocaine. But I don't believe in God. Um, and everyone who believed in God, for the most part, kept relapsing over and over again. And so I did. It was essentially a lateral move because I came from a high control group, but I was in another one trying to indoctrinate me. And I just really, I grew to have contempt for faith, because I would hear people say faith is always good. And I'd say, well, faith is why people flew planes into the towers. Faith,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
not inherently good. And every time I asked the question, no one could answer it, ever. One time I asked something and someone said, you think too much. And I was like, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice. And
If
so,
thinking about it means it makes it not true, was it ever true in the first place?
well, and if you or I have a belief and someone says, well, why do you believe that? It's not an assault. It's just
Mhm.
trying to understand, why do you hold
Exactly.
that belief? And if you have it and you can't explain why you have it, it's probably a delusion. So, um, then I was kicked out of there, of course, because I didn't believe in God. Then I lived in a terrible place where people were smoking crack and it was filthy. And then I got into where I am now. I have a little efficiency. I've been at a couple years, and that really afforded me time to write. Because I had my own space, and I didn't have every minute being orchestrated and controlled. And I was like, okay, I just want to write. That's what I want to focus on. So,
Okay.
um, basically, my memoir has 12 chapters because 12 is a biblical number, 12 steps, and I just talk about moments that where indoctrination and propaganda failed me. And the earlier parts of my life are pretty fragmented. I really didn't have very many memories. But as I was writing this, some started to come back. And especially, I published it on December 10th, actually, because Jehovah's Witnesses say I'm mentally diseased. That's what I titled my memoir. And the cover is by another XJW, me now and me as a boy. Um, Sarah Riches is her name. She's really talented. And I just spoke about essentially being subjugated by propaganda
Mhm.
and then rebelling against it, in AA,
Mhm.
essentially. And but I published it on December 10th, which was my 40th birthday of last year. I'd never celebrated my birthday before, so I felt like publishing a book was kind of a good way to make up for that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And before each chapter, I put a poem that I had written, because I've always made art and wrote songs and poetry and all that. And for me, one of the few things I really had for comfort growing up was art, music, literature. So um, then after that, I decided, these people took my identity, and I also had 100 unused poems, and that I wrote from 18 to 38.
Mhm.
And I thought it was kind of weird. I had 100 of them because that's a good number, and I thought, well, I should probably publish these. So I published my second book, which is called Gangrenous Speeches, which apostates like me, Jehovah's Witnesses, are told to avoid our gangrenous speeches because we'll warp their minds with demonic influence. And then this December, I'm writing a horror novella about the Antichrist called Despicable,
Mm.
because
Okay.
uh, people like me are also called despicable. So I call it the Apostasy Trilogy, and it's 3 books published in a year, 6 months apart, 3 times 6 for satanic imagery. Because if you say I worship the devil, you know, I'm gonna that pisses
Yeah.
me off, and I'm spiteful.
Mhm.
So, But some people, of course, they just hear you're writing a story about the Antichrist and they just assume you're evil. I mean,
Oh,
whatever.
really? I wouldn't assume that at all because I've read a few stories about the Antichrist and they've all been written by Christians. You
Yeah,
know,
it's well, of course, I live in the Bible Belt too, so
mhm.
I don't know if that's it. But yeah, well, it's like,
Well,
the
I mean, the Tim LaHaye series, is an end time series, and they talk about the Antichrist in there, and um, you know, the a lot of what's his name? Alcorn has written some things about the Antichrist,
Mhm.
and there's another author I'm thinking of that likes to write about end times prophecy, and it's not telling you about it. It's novels about
Yeah,
ways that it could possibly be. So I've read several novels by Christians talking about what the end times might be like.
yeah. Well, and what I'm writing, it's kind it's an allegory for a lot of things. I do have in it there are numerous types of torture. And the reason I included that, when I was a boy, I was told that during Armageddon, we would be tortured more than anyone else had throughout history. So I'm about five,
When
6,
when you say we, you mean apostates, or do
or
you
no,
mean
Jehovah's Witnesses.
that okay, that during the tribulation the Jehovah Witnesses would get the worst of the persecution?
Yeah, and
Okay.
so I remember, researching things that were done to slaves, that were done in Auschwitz, Christians being fed to lions. And I would lay there in bed as a little boy thinking, what will I be tortured with? What's worse than a lion eating you while you're still alive? And so I just lived in this perpetual state of fear. But some people, they just hear stuff like that and they can't see past, like the violence or whatever. But I do feel like it all serves the story. And I did create a fictional religion, and
Mm.
which it was really, it was interesting because after I did that, actually on my website I have the prologue, which has the church history and the bylaws and kind of sets the scene. But I thought, someone could find this 500 years down the road and think, oh, this is some religion, like, which could have happened with the Bible and all that stuff. It could have
Mhm.
just been somebody's, you know, I mean, it could be a horror story because there's a lot of horrible stuff in the Bible. But
Mhm.
for me, that's been a big part of my deprogramming, and kind of because I was just desolated. I lost everything about me in an instant. And I could never go back to who I was. That person doesn't exist anymore. So I kind of had to say, well, who am I? What do I want to do? And what I want to do is challenge a cult. I don't care about the millions of members or their billions of dollars. They're harming people, and I want to tell people about it.
And that okay, I've been starring questions and comments that I wanted to address, and that leads us straight into one of the comments that I had starred, which was, how long did it take you, Micah, to understand that your rejection of the Jehovah Witness faith was an opportunity to start a real life?
Um, I don't. Sometimes I don't know if I fully comprehend that. It's
Okay.
it, it's like with when I published my second book when I was 18, I fell in love with this girl who was worldly and not a Jehovah's Witness, and I had almost kind of just blocked her out of my mind. And so when I published that, because she was the first person to encourage me to write, I I've reconnected with her. I just expected to, like, exchange a message, but we've been talking every day, and we get along really well, and it's kind of allowed more parts of me to come back, flashes and memories. So I mean, it's a slow process. It, I mean, I guess I understand it, but fully comprehending it, I don't know if I'm there yet. It's like I don't know. It's been a very difficult thing because, of course, when I was in AA, like that the first place, and I said one time, I said, I don't know if I was in a cult or if Satan has warped my mind. early on. And of course, they told me I just wanted to feel special. I was a dry drunk. I wasn't dealing with my problems. I have terminal uniqueness. And so it was really hard because it was just wave after wave of oppression and propaganda. So I do feel like that I have, definitely I'm working towards that. But yeah, as far as how long, I'm just not sure. I think it's a work in progress.
Okay, I'm going to have us finish with all of the rest of the questions and comments, and then there's a specific part of your story that I want to get into. Frankenstein asks, what is your view roughly on how sociopathic, non-believing the JW leadership versus the frightened, brainwashed believers? Do you think the leaders really believe this?
I go back and forth because you had this religion's been around about 100 years, and that founder, they're all gone. So a lot of these people, they're second, third, fourth generation, and they're born in. I really don't know. I think they're delusional. I think they
Mhm.
just like my mother. She's 70. I think if she were to turn and analyze what she had done to me and just squandered her life, I think it would break her. So I think a lot of them, they're just in too deep, and they've been bamboozled so long, it would be so painful to admit that. But I truly don't know. One of the things coming from a black and white worldview where everything is this or that, I try not to have too strong of opinions on things there's no way to know. I sadly I just don't know though, because there's stuff they do, and their garish jewelry, and the things they're doing that are being revealed. I don't know, maybe they're just corrupted. They get to that level and they're viewed as, okay, he's one of us, like the mob almost. Like I don't know though.
Okay. Mark Caesar's, whoops, rats. I tried to put that comment up and I lost it. I'm sorry, Mark Caesar. I lost the first one that you had up that I was trying to get to. Mark Caesar asks, was the debt that you had associated with the church?
Oh no, so my car was repossessed. I had some medical bills, and just a lot of it actually was really old bills, or from when I was a kid, and I had depression, and I was told, if you just prayed this away, it would go away, and it didn't. So growing up, I got locked in like stress centers on 72-hour holds. My mother would call the police on me, have me dragged from the house. And I never really wanted to pay them because it annoyed me because they never did anything. And so, I mean, it's stuff I should have paid off and I hadn't. So
I see. Okay. And then Logan Fisher says, my dad, or my ex's dad, legit thought that the world was ending in 2020 and went off the deep end. Yeah, you were talking about going off the deep end and some of the things that happened in the pandemic. So you were not alone. There were other people that thought that too.
and that event, I mean, that's what Jehovah's Witness. I mean, they live in expectation of Armageddon. They're told to fantasize about being in the paradise afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
That event, because at the time I worked at a nursing home, and I'm talking to lucid 80 and 90-year-olds who are telling me, I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. And then it didn't happen. And that's why a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses aren't going to meetings anymore, or kind of waking up, because it put a stop to the constant wheel of activity. And then you kind of sit there and think, do I want to do this? Do I believe this? Wow, this is nice sitting on the couch with my dog.
Mm-hmm. What the Beck says, yeah, that didn't work for my brother's PTSD either. BS Not Accepted asks, why do JWs picture 50s style families in their literature?
I don't know. I got in trouble so many times because I like to wear black.
Oh, really? You're
Oh
not
yeah.
supposed to wear black.
Well, no, that's nowhere in the literature. It's nowhere. But each congregation has a group of elders, and despite they will tell you, what we're doing here is being done in Rwanda and Germany and the UK and Mississippi. But bullshit. If they don't let, sorry, I should have asked if I could curse,
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You say whatever you want to say on my channel.
but they, thank you. If they don't like you, they will just nitpick, and they will nitpick things about you that they will allow other people to do. So because I like to wear black, and of course, when I was 18, I weighed 300 pounds. So,
Oh,
they say black is slimming, and I don't know if it worked or not, but I tried. But yeah, they said, like, are you trying to rebel or offend people? I mean, I don't want to wear khaki. I don't think it's a good look. I don't know. I think the reason for that, honestly, is they tell you to be no part of the world, and they really create, a us versus them mentality. So if you just look like a, a geek, essentially, maybe that'll help alienate you. I don't know. But it's never really addressed
mm-hmm,
into like the laity.
mm-hmm. There's one thing that I saw on your website that I'm interested in. You said you were shunned by your mother.
Hmm. Yeah,
How did that come about? Is she still shunning you?
she is. So when you are disfellowshipped, what they'll tell you, they say you are cut off from God's Holy Spirit. He cannot hear your prayers,
Mm-hmm,
and everyone you love will not speak to you. They will not help you. They do not care about you. You're just, even now, what they've said within the past year or two is if somebody has left the truth, like me, to view them as already dead. And the first time I was disfellowshipped, it was for 18 months. I lived with my mother. So she spoke to me, but not about spiritual things, not about things said at the meeting, like you're supposed to study together. That didn't happen. And then the second time I was disfellowshipped for my ex wife, um, because I wanted to be with her, but the congregation liked her and didn't like me. So they told me I couldn't talk to her except at meetings. And I said, well, that's not scriptural. It's not, there's, this is obviously personal. And I didn't listen. So I was just disfellowshipped and shunned for 2.5 years, 2 years and 7 months. And my mom saw me a few times. When my son was born, she came to the hospital, and he had problems breathing. My ex-wife was on Pitocin, which we learned later can cause respiratory distress. But they flew him from Franklin, Indiana to Riley, and he was only there 5 days. But my mother drove me because I was just beside myself. My ex-wife couldn't leave because she was bleeding. And she told me if they offer him blood, let him die, because you're not supposed to. My mother
mm-hmm,
is an insane zealot, and my father, when he was dying of cancer, he rejected blood and martyred himself for this cult.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And yeah, but and then now this time when the elder told her, because I told him, I said, people are killing themselves and you don't care. You mistreat people for sadness and depression and grief. And I did tell him, I said, people like you don't deserve to live. That's just pure evil. Well, he told her, like I said, that I threatened to kill them all. And she hung up on me and blocked me. When I reached out to her in jail, she did testify against me, painted me as a monster. And and then when my mom sees my son. When I do see him, yeah, it is. And if you leave, you will have catastrophic loss. I it's but yeah, my mom still shuns me. The fact that I've spoken out and published books. I asked my son the last time I saw him, about a month ago. I said, he calls my mother Birdie because that's her nickname. And I asked, does Birdie ever talk about me? And he said, no. She,
Actually, that's probably a good thing.
well,
Because if she did, she would probably say bad things. So at least she's not bad mouthing you.
well, my son, I mean, he looks just like me when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell him, I said, well, that's because I tell him, I said, Birdie thinks daddy serves Satan and she doesn't care if daddy lives or dies. and you should ask her about that, because I'm going to tell him, to
He's a bit young for that kind of conversation.
true, he is. But at the same time, my mother fills her house and surrounds my child with elders and the same people who abused me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though, it's a horrific circumstance that I'm working to, my ex-wife isn't active, and I've asked her to keep my son away from my mother, but she won't. She
Mm.
just says they're not, 5 minutes with him or with her endangers him, which is awful and sad, but it's just the case. It's really difficult because I can tell you, like, knowing that your child is around someone who was so cruel to you, it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard to not do anything about it. Um, and I mean, now at least, if you look up my name, both of those titles, which are Jehovah's Witness shaming terms, my name is forever linked to those.
Hmm.
And so I use the name my because Micah is a book of the Bible. I call it my Watchtower slave name, really, but I use the name they gave me to shame them. Uh,
Hmm.
Not my
Hmm.
dad, but yeah, shunning is really difficult. I mean, I think it's about the worst thing you can do to somebody, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like your mom is. Do you have brothers and sisters?
So, I have a half brother. When I was 25, someone contacted me who was 10 years older. Now, we never did any like blood tests, but based on what he told me, and I mean, he looks just like one of my uncles. Like we favor each other quite a bit.
Hmm.
And I used to think, he said his mother never told my dad and always sent him down different paths with the wrong name. But now, based on realizing that Jehovah's Witnesses are not moral, good people, who knows? My
Hmm.
dad could have known and just ignored that kid. I don't know. We're not very close. I do have
Or the mother may not have wanted him to have the influence of the Jehovah Witnesses, and so never told him, so that he would never try to get the child into that
that
lifestyle.
that could be. There's some dark stuff on that side of the family, which I don't want to go into. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things I'll never know, because my parents were not born into this. They
Mhm.
joined in their late 30s, which was not long after 1975, which was when Jehovah's Witnesses, they said stay alive until 75. At one
Mhm.
convention, they said shower this dying world with magazines. And many people gave up. They didn't go to college. They cashed in, all their savings, lost their businesses, all this stuff, and then nothing happened. So I just
They were
don't.
expecting the second coming to come in 75.
Oh yeah, Jehovah's
That
Witnesses.
that makes perfect sense to me, because one of the things that I remember and was going to ask you about, although this is before your time, is I remember when the Jehovah Witnesses used to say that they were the 144,000, and as soon as there were 144,000 of them, that Christ would return. And that happened in the 70s. And I don't know if it was in 75 or not, but I remember that that happened in the 70s. And when Jesus didn't return, then they had to change the prophecy, or what the prophecy means.
And there was kind of to my understanding, a mass exodus at that time,
Oh, there
and
was. Mm.
a lot of people left,
Hmm.
and I feel like that's kind of happened with COVID. When 3 years ago, I got on XJW Reddit anonymously, and there were about 70,000. Now it's just under 90,000. And I'm pretty active on now Twitter and Instagram and all that, but I was anonymous until I published my book. But I have, you'll just see, like, when something negative comes out about them that's in the news, followers will jump up. Or I've had people reach out to me they say, I just realized I was in a cult. I just woke up, like, my world's falling apart. And
Hmm.
there have been a few times I've been afforded the opportunity to talk to them and kind of talk them down, and share my story. And I do feel like Jehovah's Witnesses are scrambling because they're saying now, what they've been saying, you need to listen to what the governing body says, even if it doesn't make sense from a human point of view, for years. About a year ago, they said newborn babies that are unbaptized are enemies of God, which,
Mm,
I feel like they're being ramped up to a Jonestown event, which is why I tell my child this stuff, because they are delusional. My mother,
mhm,
I used to have them. Jehovah's Witnesses have Armageddon go bags in their closet. You have a backpack with supplies. So when Armageddon, they're insane. And I, the average person just doesn't know the lunacy that resides among Jehovah's Witnesses. They're just nutters.
mhm. Mark
Mhm.
Caesar asks, which preacher was it that was selling the Revelation food packs? I wonder how much you made from that.
For $6.66, probably. I don't know.
I doubt that. I
I
doubt
haven't
that.
heard that.
And Logan Fisher said, I had family and friends that bought food supplies and water for Y2K, another time when the world should have ended.
I remember that. And I remember like Jehovah's Witnesses scoffing about that. They were like, yeah,
Oh,
people think,
really?
oh yeah, anytime somebody says like 2012, they're like, well, the Bible said, like these people are so arrogant, but we know only Jehovah's going to bring it about, and it's not going to be when they've guessed it. Oh yeah, that Jehovah's, one thing because when I was alone, kind of before I started writing, I just had to question every single thing about myself because you're so contrived.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, like, do I like even like, do I like this, or is it just because I was told I had to like it? It was it, it was an unpleasant thing, but I feel like it was beneficial. But yeah, they're just sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought, but they're like a four-door car. You need to get a four-door car so you can go out and service because God wants you to have a four-door car. Well, I
Oh,
have always,
really?
oh yeah, and I've always liked muscle cars. I've had
Uh-huh.
three Mustangs, so like that always was evidence of how I wasn't, a good Christian. I have
Mm.
19 tattoos. I got them all while I was a Jehovah's Witness. That was not well received, and yeah, it's just, I mean, what's crazy is I don't smoke very often. Every once in a while, I want a cigar, and
Mm-hmm.
I know somebody who was shunned for 4 decades for smoking cigarettes,
Oh,
and
wow.
they got reinstated, and then they died. They had emphysema. They were a sweet, really sweet man.
Mm-hmm.
But like when I smoke a cigar, like I feel this exhilaration because my life was just so small and controlled, or a day when I'm off, if I just want to lay in bed and do nothing, I don't feel guilt. I can talk to people that aren't raised like me. And because in the back of my mind, it's always like, well, these are sinners. And I need to keep a respectful distance. And you're always trying to look at an opportunity to proselytize to them, because if you have an opportunity and you don't, you're told you have blood on your hands and God will kill you. It's always Jehovah will kill you, and you always are expecting and hoping Armageddon tomorrow. So you might hurt your hand or something, and you're like, oh shit, and then you're like, oh God, please forgive me, I didn't mean to curse, please show mercy on me.
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's paralytic terror. It's crazy, just the most mundane things when I do them that I'm sure people take for granted because I just lived a life of complete subjugation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mark Caesar says, the last time a JW came to my door, I pretended I was interested. They came back 3 times for an hour each time until they tried to hard sell me. And then I told them I was just wasting their time. Suckers. The
That's
last time JWs came to my door, I thought about doing that, but I just didn't have time for them. So I just told them I was an apostate. And
very,
they looked at me and, you're what? You're an apostate? And I said, yes, I'm an apostate. I said,
yeah.
thank you. And they left, and I've never seen them again.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone about, because the main way they supplement their ranks are the born in children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're born into that and isolated and inundated with propaganda, and everybody believes it and reinforces it, it's very powerful. It was for me at least. But somebody said going door to door isn't for recruits because you're told that the world will hate you because you are no part of it. So when
Mhm.
people go out and are mistreated, it reinforces their persecution narrative, which I mean, I'm not, do whatever you want, but anytime worldly people, quote unquote, have been like, I was talking about how I was raised to be very homophobic.
Mhm.
I never hated gay people. I just thought they deserved to die, but I thought everyone deserved to die. Like for me, it was like, you're going to die for your birthday. You're going to die for being gay. What? You're just going to die. It doesn't really, it's sad. But I was talking about that and how I felt shame. And somebody I work with who's not really the warmest person. I mean, they're kind of like a frat boy. And they just said, "Well, you didn't know any better." Uh, you know, and like for me that was just really profound that people don't hold my past against me. And
Mhm.
it's just staggering because you're told that everybody who isn't a Jehovah's Witness is just evil and controlled by the devil, and you're really taught hatred, but you're told it's love. So you don't understand, um it takes a lot to deconstruct. And I feel like, for me at least, being completely severed from everything,
Mhm.
they don't really have strings on me, because I know people who are like, well, I want to save my mother or my sister or my brother, but there's so much toxicity. It's just, I feel like more often than not it draws people back in. Like, I'm not in the life-saving business anymore. I'm
Mhm.
not trying to uh bring JWs out either. I would like to warn people, and I would like to expose them, and I would like to sell books. And I do think, I'm like, writing's my passion. I've always loved writing. I've always loved words. And to actually put stories out into the world and receive positive reviews and feedback, even if I just like hearing people's interpretation. I mean, there's actually an Eminem lyric, but he says, "I'm alive again, more alive than I have ever been." And
Mhm.
I 100%.
Um, did you see the video of the elder that was caught buying liquor during on Sunday?
Yes, the day I watched that, I wrote a poem, and it's the first poem in my memoir, because
Mhm.
you know Bethelites take a vow of poverty, and they have propaganda cartoons where they tell the little girl Sophia, "Don't buy ice cream, donate it to Jehovah," and it shows heaven rejoicing. And I was just like, that son of a bitch is spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of like little Sophia's money. That was the moment. I didn't leave at that point. I just kept drinking. But that was the moment that I knew it wasn't the truth. Because
Mhm.
I, and I tried to tell my mother about that. She said, "Well, look what they do with the Hulk in movies." I'm like, "Mom, nobody thinks the Hulk is real. That's Tony Morris. But he has been removed as a governing body member, and they're scrubbing him from the website. They've promoted two other people, and now they're just Watchtower, erases history, creates a lie, and the lie becomes the truth."
We have another question from Mark Caesar. What was it like being able to celebrate things like birthdays for the first time?
So, last year, now I published my memoir, and I didn't really tell anybody. A few people at work, they got me a cupcake with a candle, and they sang happy birthday to me, and I cried. And it was even like, it was an emotion that was too big to process
Mm.
or
Mhm.
understand, because you've been told that it's just wrong and God will kill you for this. And
Mhm.
just, I grew up really non-entity. Most Jehovah's Witnesses did not care about me or interact with me. So that was a very powerful thing. And then last year, another XJW sent me a care package with a Christmas tree, decorations, Christmas stuff. I didn't know. And I didn't even know how to make the tree, but I set up a little area and I wrapped my son's presents. I bought him he loves horror movies. He's
Mm.
5, but he loves Freddy Krueger, Pennywise. So I bought him a Chucky doll that's as tall as him, and he won't take it home. So I have a Chucky doll staring at me while I sleep. But it, it's one of those things where it's like, I can go to therapy, but I
Mm-hmm.
have to have exposure therapy because I could have never predicted how that would affect me. It didn't hurt me, but it was very, very overwhelming. And
Mm-hmm.
even I've reached out to my mom's family,
Mm.
which I I've texted 3 of my cousins and I've met 2 of them in person. And I'd maybe seen them 4 or 5 times in my entire life before the past 4 months. And I didn't even think. I sent a message and I was like, "Hey, could I know you maybe?" And yeah, they my cousin brought me and my son ice cream, gave me a bunch of toys for him. And it's really hard because to just basic humanity is just overwhelming. I've just realized, like, I was just abused for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of people say, like you're angry,
Well,
and
hell yeah.
I am, and I'm trying to get rid of it, and I'm trying to move past it.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, just being treated like garbage. Just when I was a boy, when I was my son's age, he's 5. My mother told me, because Jehovah's Witnesses say this of all of them, you're a good for nothing slave.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember how devastating that was to me. And I'm like, good for nothing. Like, I mean, that's pretty much saying like a piece of garbage, bereft of any worth. And my mom's like, oh, but it's love from God. And but I mean, she told me as a boy too. She said, if you leave, I'll love you, but I won't be a part of your life, which I don't consider that love. You know, I,
Mm-hmm.
I'm an orphan. My mother did think too many things have happened. Reconciliation is impossible because boundaries for me are more important than forgiveness. My mom doesn't think she's done anything wrong. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, it sounds like when you were disfellowshipped or left the church, you really didn't miss much because the primary draw of the church is the community. And it sounds like you never really had the community at any point.
so the first you have to write a letter to be reinstated. And the first time I wrote a letter, and you're supposed to say why you should be reinstated. So I said, well, I've been praying every day. I've been, pardon me, reading from the devotional, reading the Bible. I've been attending meetings. I've been highlighting and answering. But I also said, you people don't talk to me or acknowledge me or respond to me or even care if I exist. So the fact that I prioritize my relationship with God is indicative of my worth. And I wrote 2 letters like that. They refused them. So I actually got online and I looked up a bullshit letter an apostate had written, just laid out, and I just punched in a couple things and gave it to the elders, and they loved it.
Mhm, mhm,
You know, and that's one of many things throughout my life when it was just evidence that I was not in the truth, that it was not led by God. But I just I, I wanted my father back so much, and I was told he would be resurrected, that I just put blinders on, and I tolerated horrific abuse because I wanted my father back. And then I remember when I saw my son, you know, he was in a box, but I just knew I loved him more than God, and I knew I would do anything to protect him. And
mhm.
you know,
JWs are very like the Calvinists in that respect. And about half of the time that I was a believer, well, no, not that much, but about the last 10 or 15 years that I was a believer, I was in a Calvinist church, and they also teach that you are nothing. And the point of it is to try to have a low view of man so that you can have a high view of God, so that you can see God is so much better. And since I have found my way out, whenever I talk to Calvinists, one of the things I always bring up is they believe in predestination,
Oh.
that who is saved was determined by God before the world even existed. And so I said, okay, if God did not choose to save your children, are you okay with God damning them to hell? And I've been just absolutely flabbergasted to hear Calvinists say, yeah,
Mm,
that's God's choice. If that's God's choice, then yeah, that's fine.
mm,
And I always tell them, please do not let your children hear you say this.
yeah.
And well, why not? And it's because it will be damaging to them.
Mm.
And
Uh,
you totally get that.
yeah, I have a friend, or well, I had a friend. He was disfellowshipped when I was 20,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually happened to see him last year, I think. I was just going into work, and I heard somebody yell my name,
Mm-hmm.
and I had shunned him that whole time, and he was my first best friend. It was really, really painful to do that to him. But I heard his mother say countless times, she'd talk about him and say, well, Jehovah, I love Logan, but Jehovah won't destroy someone if they're not evil. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, if you don't go along, Jehovah's Witnesses view you as evil, and they never lead with the most offensive aspects of their faith. It's all about presentation, and looking like you're from the 50s, speaking in a polite way, and they even teach you, like if I was walking up to your door, I would be scanning. Is there evidence of children? Is there evidence of pets? Does this person like plant life? And then you knock and be like, I notice you have a dog. Don't you look forward to a time where animals won't have to suffer? Neither will humans. Everyone will be, you were taught to be so manipulative and so predatory, but you don't know any better because you're never allowed to hear anything that opposes that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just crazy how they get people to go along with just horrible things.
Okay, Mark Caesar asks, do a mental flip or comments, do a mental flip with your anger and think of it in a positive way. It showed you the way out of your religious delusion.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, I kind of do embrace that because I've told people I've said, gee, if I wasn't angry, all that would mean is I'm not paying attention. My mother is
Mm.
still actively trying to indoctrinate my child,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not because she thinks if she doesn't, she's killing him. She will be subtle. She will show him the cartoons. Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a difference too between like righteous rage. Are you angry that people are being oppressed and hated and abused, or you're just filled with anger? But I guess what I should have said is when I was a Jehovah's Witness, there was this anger, but everything was always evidence of my complete lack of worth and just that I was inferior. And yeah, it's just crazy. I told my cousins, I said, so I'm publishing 3 books 6 months apart for the satanic imagery. And they're all religious and they all loved it. And my mother's twin brother, who died when he was 37, they all said, your Uncle Glenn, you're a lot like him. They told me like I'm funny like him. They said he would have done that as a middle finger to a cult as well. So it's weird that genetic traits I spent so long trying to repressing, but also praying, remove this from me when it's just my identity. But I didn't know that because my mother kept me away from them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had another question for you, and now I can't remember what it was. We're getting close to the end of the hour, though, so I want to give you an opportunity to one more time tell people um, what books are available that you've written and when your next book comes out, and we'll go with that.
Okay. So if you go to micahAllenLosh.com, uh, if you go under the Apostasy trilogy, my memoir is Mentally Diseased, Cover art is by Sarah Riches, another XJW, and I have a poetry in it I wrote before each chapter. And then Gangrenous Speeches, it's pretty much a time capsule of just abject misery. I mean, there are some emo love poems, but people hear the word poetry, and it's not like Hemingway or there's, I don't know, a lot of them would be like, could be songs and stuff too. But I think you kind of see a progression from 18 to 38, and just, um, I also feel like it's complementary to my memoir. It kind of fleshes it out a little. And then, and that came out on 610. They're both available on Amazon. And then I'm writing Despicable, which is a horror novella, and I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's kind of messed up and dark and twisted, but I mean, I like Stephen King, and I like horror movies, so I wanted to write one, and it'll come out December 10th of this year. Oh, and I should say, this cover art is done by the Holistic Hue. You can find them on Twitter. They're an XJW as well. And the third book will have artwork by Stuart Fletcher. He's from Quebec, I think. And yeah, I just wanted to create art with people from my community. And, heck, if I could have found editors that were XJW, and I had a lawyer go over my memoir because I don't want to get sued, I would have tried to just do that. I really think art is healing. And there are people who break down the propaganda, but I also think you can reach outside sources when you use your talent, because they really suppress that. You can be an artist, but only for Watchtower. It all has to be in servitude of the cult, and it's really empowering to pursue the things you want. So hopefully other people will do that as well.
And I remember my question now. It was, do you watch Telltale, or does that remind you too much of the past?
I have seen him. For me, one of the things I've noticed is Watchtower leadership has this very odd cadence, but the Heaven's Gate cult leader used it. I watched The Way Down with Gwen Shamblin. All of these cult leaders have this very slow, intentional, methodical way. So when people show too many of the clips, I just can't watch them. I don't want to use the word trigger, but
Mm-hmm.
I almost, if it's a different group, okay. But
Mm-hmm.
Jehovah's Witnesses, they had such control over me. I've spent enough time listening to them. I do keep apprised of the the major developments,
Mm-hmm.
but beyond that, I really don't like to watch that stuff. But Telltale is very good. I like him.
Excellent. Exceptionally Average has a really good question here. Do JWs develop wealthy members?
Well, so I will tell you this. All Jehovah's Witnesses are equal, but some Jehovah's Witnesses are more equal. So, like, if your daddy's an elder, it's really not about wealth. It's about the people in charge and your relationship to them. Some people get a really quick turnaround if they're popular or they're related to somebody. It's just, there are a lot of variables, but I really don't know that many wealthy JWs to answer that.
Okay. All right. And we are about out of time. I do want to let people know that next week, my guest is going to be Godless Engineer. And so that should be a fun time. And I'm working on a video for next week on a guy who claims that a fossil proves that Noah's flood really happened. And that video is nearly done. There's some geology in it, and I'm waiting on Steve Bowman for a little bit of help with that one. And if you haven't checked it out yet, the video that I just released for this week was a guy who his name is Abraham Ojeda, and he has predicted that we are going to see nuclear bombs. Russia is going to nuke Jerusalem on September 22nd of this year. So you can check that one out as well. All right. Thank you very much, Micah, for being my guest today. It has been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you to everyone in the chat and everyone who's watching later. Live your life.